Welcome to Area 2. You know the routine. I ignore the main quest and go on an item scavenger hunt, digging up everything. So, digging spoilers, skipping timestamps on the screen, 3, 2, 1. To the north of Garen is a screen with an ice slash, not to be confused with the Mega Man 1 weapon with a similar name. Also on this screen is a one-way passage back to Area 1. Good if you don't want to deal with the lava ape, but you'll have to go through the log tunnel if you want to go back to Area 2, so it saves half a trip, I guess. Returning and heading northeast will eventually bring us our first major useful piece of gear, a medium attack armor of ice. This will make things in this chapter significantly easier, because now we will have 12 AP and can use the natural attack twice per turn. More on that later. It should be noted that while the Ice Burnak have a shorter vision radius than most others, it's still super sensitive, and it's fairly easy to get accidentally snagged in a fight. Like their Gothna equivalent, these guys just love to slow you down. And finally, the Holy Grail. Here's another one of those quest dig spots I was talking about. And a demonstration of how powerful the armor is. Nothing there. Further south is an Earth Slash as an alternative to the Ice one. If you find the pile of rocks hidden here, congratulations! The well-hidden rocks will grant us our first Talon. With the 12 AP from the medium attack armor, we can actually use a claw or talon 3 times per turn. Imagine that for a moment. Forgot to also mention that claws and talons have a higher chance at critical hits than most weapons, so you can imagine what spamming this weapon can do. We actually get this weapon from Kazi after a quest, but that's all the way in Chapter 5. This energy stone and the one I dug up earlier are both for a later quest, like the improvement pack. Not entirely sure why some quest items are diggable in advance and others aren't, but I suppose it's because some are more plot spoiler heavy than others. Just a barricaded hideout, nothing to see here. All the way down here is an earth spear that you can use as an alternative to that water spear from before. It actually took me a while to find this spot because I rarely ventured here. And finally, all the way back up is a water launcher. briefly hinted at this in my introduction, but I completely forgot to admire one graphical touch about this game that was completely unnecessary. Every time you screen transition to a map with water plants, they will be a slightly different size or appear in a slightly different location to emulate subtle movement. I think that's really cool. A similar effect is used later on in Chapter 6. Once again, here are all the items and their respective coordinate numbers. Just for funsies, though, don't type in move 130 for the medium attack armor of ice, because it'll teleport you to an island isolated from the rest of the map, and so you'll get soft locked there if you don't use cheats to get yourself back out. Now we farm the enemies for stuff. Skip to this timestamp if you don't want drop spoilers. 3, 2, 1. The rock uscle aren't particularly rewarding for the difficulty they impose. There's only one scout Nektan that guards the village, and only one air Gofna by the border guarding Area 3, where more are located. The Earth Burnek and Ice Burnek don't drop anything particularly useful, now that you have medium armor and talons, so the primary and most rewarding farming target would be the Water Burnek. Water Burnek aren't as tedious as rock uscles to fight, but still a challenge if you take on more than one in a battle without sufficient gear. The XP they drop is insane, as well as their notably useful medium gear. Once I'm all decked out and at a sufficient level, I usually resume questing, but if you think the medium gear makes the game brokenly easy or want to complete your item collection, nothing's stopping you from looking for other gear. Going back to the Ice Burnek's drops, it's an absolute shame, and possibly a mistake, that they drop ice metal pieces instead of shards. Ice metal pieces are only used for the very first fetch quest in the game. They're useless to me now. I'd have to farm Gofna for 12 hours if I want my own gear. Oh well. While I'm here, I might as well talk about the Nektan in advance. As mentioned before, the Scout Nektan is a local enemy, but the others usually only appear for specific quests, so don't take those drops as guaranteed 100% complete or accurate. You might not pick up the items anyway. Reidak's drops are all guaranteed, but that's for later. To pass the time while farming, I will hyper-analyze the two new weapons at our disposal. The Slash can be seen as an alternate branch of a Claw evolution. Instead of high damage, low AP like the Talon, this melee weapon deals damage to multiple adjacent targets, at the price of its damage being moderate at best. Not very practical in my opinion, unless you're somehow skilled at grouping enemies together and melee hitting them. You can use a spear, or launcher, etc. to do that, technically, but I find it to be too much work. Maybe it's useful against large groups of enemies that deliberately corner you, like Haikaki, but that's way later on. They wanted to make Zactan's tool an actual in-game weapon, and they did it. Not much else to say. Look at that, already leveled up from a single Burnek. The launcher is subjectively more interesting and serves as an evolutionary branch of the spear. Also like the Slash, it is somewhat modeled after a Paraka weapon, specifically Hakan's lava launcher. Compared to the spear, the launcher now pushes enemies at further distance, deals more damage, and can be used point blank. However, it once again has finite ammunition as a counterbalance, much like the actual lava launcher, canonically. As seen here, I will certainly be using the launcher in tandem with the Talon on my quest. This is probably a good place to show off the triple talent combo thing. I got the greaves! Never mind. Now we can move a whole 5 spaces. Like the medium armor, kinda busted to get it this early. We didn't get the medium defense armor from the Bionicle, but that's okay, I wasn't planning on using it. There'll be plenty more Bionicle later on if I feel like farming them. Our first quest is to retrieve a Lightstone, Life Stone, and Power Stone from the Matoran village because Nektan took over the village before any of the remaining Matoran had a chance to grab their stuff. Nektan are the Paraka's robot minions, and I have no idea why they share their name with an unrelated blue Skagdi from 2010. A single Scout Nektan guards the center part of the village. Enemies can spot you from a certain radius and chase you to start combat, and Scout Nektan have the largest spotting radius of any enemy, approximately tied with the Guardian drones. It's not very powerful, but don't be surprised if you get spotted by it when rummaging around the huts. Speaking of which, a shortcut is to only enter the small houses to find items, then make your way to the lower part of the village and find a crate with the last item. The rightmost large building has an unused function where you can go to the second floor and look around. Aside from a furnace or two, it's completely empty. And the leftmost building houses Velika supplies that we don't have the key to yet. At any rate, looks like the Nektan spotted us. You may have noticed that this is the first major time an enemy actually dodged one of our moves. Nektan have a nasty habit of dodging things, and it'll only get worse down the line. That's a bit redundant. You could have just said it was locked. Oh, that's about everything. Reporting back to Garen, he will keep the supplies, but give back the Lifestone as a freebie pocket item. Pocket items, as I nickname them, are secondary utilities that are stored in the crotch region of the character, which I hopefully assume represents some kind of pocket or fanny pack. And said Lifestone is a simplistic healing item, only really useful if you plan on going into long battles in which you can retreat from the enemy in question, as its AP cost is too high for you to attack efficiently on the same turn you heal, but it's still alright to have around. Regardless of whether you managed to get spotted by the Scout Nektan and fought it or not, Garen will always say that the Nektan spotted you and alerted more Nektan to reinforce a place, so the next quest is to defeat the wave of Nektan that have entered the village. These little Guardian guys may not look intimidating, especially with their health, but their dodge rate and movement points can make them tedious to deal with. Somehow, though, I lucked out on both. I find it really cool that the defense Nektan can suck you in like that. I wish more enemies had mechanics like that in the game. After defeating the Nektan, we report back to Garen yet again. His dialogue is supposed to mention giving you an air Zamor launcher, which he does, but a glitch causes it to be occasionally overwritten by his second piece of dialogue, instructing you to escort him to the wastes nearby, and so he'll usually say that line twice. The wastes, so to speak, are a simple junk heap west of the village. Going back to Garen not doing anything during a fight when you escort him, I believe Dofus's escort quests later balanced it so that characters would do something in the fight, but you had a limit of how many fights you could get into before having to restart it, and I wish they did the same thing here. The Resistance Matoran are supposed to be able to kick total ass. What is this nonsense? Now we fight even more Nektan reinforcements. Thankfully, this is the last time you'll have to do that in this chapter. I believe there's a slight difficulty curve in that now there are repair Nektan occasionally, but it's still a little tedious. They do drop decent experience, though. I think I'll upgrade attack for once. Finally. When you report back, Reidak will ambush with 3 repair Nektan. If you're doing a minimalist run, it's best to pick off the repair Nektan one by one so they don't heal Reidak, although it is still recommended due to a feedback loop issue with the enemy. Essentially, they can boost AP for Nektan in the surrounding area, but it consumes just as much or less AP to use. So when combined with another repair Nektan, the first will AP boost, because everyone's health is full at the start. The second Nektan will use the AP boost twice to the surrounding Nektan, because it was already buffed by the first. And then the third one will use it even more. You can probably already see the problem with this oversight. Repair and Nectan are easy enough to kill and cannot harm the player, but the AP feedback can make turns last forever if left unchecked. And if Reidak joins the battle with at least 2 unchecked Repair Nectan, all hell will break loose. Reidak himself uses actual items in the game, namely a stone Zamor launcher and stone ripper, that buzzsaw he has. It's another melee weapon that deals high amounts of damage, so the general strategy is to simply keep your distance. As he has 3 movement points, this is only really a challenge if you don't have any greaves. And now, a moment of Bionicle bonus lore. I nicknamed this version of Reidak Tier 1, and there is a good reason for that. It's because in Universe, Proc have 2 innate powers, 1 double-ended multifunctional weapon, and an Anti-Dermis Zamor launcher. Like the other members of the Skakti species, they also have elemental powers like Toa, but they can only be used in tandem with other Skakti, and let's just say the Paraka don't really care about that unity junk. One of those 2 innate powers will always be a vision-related power like laser vision. Reidak has infrared and heat-detecting vision, not to be confused with Hakon's heat vision that actually shoots beams of heat from his eyes, but his primary power is virtual indestructibility, meaning that every time he loses a fight, his body will physically adapt to be stronger the second time around. This is one of the several reasons the Toa Nouveau lost to the Paraka off-screen earlier in the story. Many were concentrating their energies on subduing Reidak when simply imprisoning him and focusing on the others would be more efficient. They had no idea he could readapt in advance, but you get the point. By the time Pohatu actually pinned him down, their powers were already drained. So, in the game, while all the Paraka will reappear for rematches, Reidak will do so the most frequently, and therefore have more difficult forms as the game progresses. It also serves as a clever excuse to give him a weaker form for a first encounter, as he is slightly less adapted to the player's fighting style. It's a story element that actually works well with the gameplay. He is quite literally the game's Balrog. This has been your moment of Bionicle bonus lore. Reidak isn't too bad if you have the Talon and medium gear with you, and the launcher itself is particularly useful as he is only deadly when he hits close up. I think I'll give him a free blow just to show off his melee move. Did a decent fuck ton. GG. Upon his defeat, Garen will reward the player with a range pack, a pocket item that debuffs the range of surrounding enemies. It is appropriate to give it to the player at this point in the game than it is in the previous chapter when most baddies were melee. Of course, it only shows up after you talk to him. Speaking of previous chapters, that wraps up this one. Tune in for Chapter 2, where we meet a Paraka who has been hiding under our noses all along. Dang, spoiled who it was.